Adam in here real quick and we can get going. There we go. Adam,
Hi
how are
there.
you?
I'm good. How about you?
I'm doing good as well. Welcome everybody to episode number 10 of Show Choir Nation. I am William. I'm usually not the face you see on the top of the screen, but our fearless leader Ethan was unable to make it tonight. So you guys are stuck with just me and Adam and some special guests that we'll introduce later in the podcast. We're super excited for that. Adam, we kind of start each episode by asking how each competition weekend went. We will talk about the event that you were at more broadly in a little bit here, but first off, just how was your comp weekend?
Well, I'll tell you what, it was a long, tiring day. The show choir grind mostly watching, but it was super fun. It was very energetic, and it felt very, very akin to what you would expect from a late season show choir competition.
Awesome. Yeah, that's pretty similar to the competition that I was at too and the experience that I had. I mean, we started the morning late, we started the afternoon late, we ended finals so far off schedule that I don't even want to do the math and figure out what it was. Um, but there were lots of late season shows, lots of performances that I saw from groups that I was like, I owe you an apology. I wasn't familiar with your game. So that was fantastic. It's a couple minutes in, we've let some people filter in. So I guess this will serve as the formal introduction. Welcome, everybody, to episode number 10 of Show Choir Nation. This is the premier podcast from the Home Room Show Choir Network. I am William. I am on the top of your screen if you're watching this. To my bottom is Adam. Unfortunately, we are without our dear friend, our dearly departed friend, Ethan, tonight. He has departed from the night, not forever. Uh, this episode is off the rails already. Anyways, Ethan can make it tonight, so Adam and I are going to be joined by a couple special guests later on in the show to make up for that. As always, if you cannot stick around for the full hour, we will be posting the show on Spotify and YouTube after the show is over, so that'll be available within the half hour after this show is done tonight. All right, we touched on this a couple minutes ago, but we're going to dive right into the results here. We've got the Avon Vocal Invitational. I'm saying that correctly, right? Avon, not Avon? Okay, good.
Yep,
Okay,
you're
the
all good. Yeah.
Avon Vocal Invitational. This one in Indiana. We have some results here in the mixed finals. Taking home the win with Best Vocals, Brownsburg Spotlight Singers & Co. First runner-up with Best Choreography, Plainfield B&B. Second runner-up, Fisher's Electrum. Third runner-up, Lawrence Central, Central Sound. Adam, you are the Indiana native from among us. Brownsburg Plainsfield Fishers was a matchup that a lot of people had eyes on as saying, maybe none of these are our top 3 or top 5 choirs in Indiana, but they're perhaps just under that. And clearly with the caption split, this matchup did not disappoint. What did you see on stage this weekend?
Uh, yeah, well, I'll tell you what, all choirs were within a 3-4 point margin going into finals. It was extremely, extremely close, and the host choir Avon as well was also right in there, right? So you've got some groups that are really kind of battling for that recognition. Out of state, you especially hear big names like Carmel, Center Grove, and Franklin Central. And I think that in most circuits, you have those big names that kind of get heard in the national discussion. So it was a fight of some really great in-state groups. It was a tight fight as well, and you also catch Lawrence Central making finals here over some other excellent groups in that mixed division. So that's definitely also worth pointing out. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I just didn't even want to make a prediction for this one. Going in, I think ultimately I did wind up making one, and I think I had Plainfield on top, and then Brownsburg in second, and Fishers in third, and I actually had Castle taking that fourth finalist spot, which I know didn't happen at the end. I also just want to give a shout out to Lawrence Central. I believe that this is one of their first finals appearances of the year. Granted, not everybody down in Indiana does finals, but they beat Crosstown Lawrence North to make finals, and Lawrence North is a group that I think has picked up some buzz this year. They beat Castle as well, so a really good showing for Central Sound there. Also want to touch on this women's division before we move away from AVI. Fisher Sound, best vocals, best choreography on top. Plainfield Femme Fatale in the second spot. Brownsburg Starlight Voices at the 3. Lawrence North Bella Bravada at the 4. We knew coming in that Fisher Sound was probably going to win this competition. Anything from there on out, a little bit more variable. I guess, do you agree with the results? And as we start closing in on ISSMA and Noblesville, what implications do these results have for some of these choirs?
Yes, so I'll start by saying this. Fisher Sound scored higher than any group in the building that day, higher than any mixed group, higher than a univoice group. In fact, outplacing all the univoice groups in their divisions by over 20 points. And that's big on an ISMA score sheet or an Indiana State School Music Association score sheet. Brownsburg and Plainfield also coming in very close to each other, fighting for that first runner-up spot. But Fisher Sound is just such a group to contend with. And I think when we look at women's groups and treble groups across the country, there's very few groups that you could even compare to the caliber of this one. And so if you haven't had a chance to take a look at their show, I would highly recommend it. I think sometimes what treble groups in Indiana do kind of defines the norm for treble groups across the country. And I think it's fantastic to see something like this going into these last couple weeks of the season with state championships and whatnot.
Awesome. Lawrence North is a group that I pegged here, kind of similar to Lawrence Central in the mixed finals. Lawrence North is a group that kind of, I don't want to say it was best of the rest because that sounds a little bit unfair to them, but I don't think they draw as many headlines as Beberg, Plainfield, and Fishers. And so Lawrence North, I think, is a group that did a lot of good for themselves. I don't know if they're an ISMA group or not, but I think that if they are, and they are, that it's definitely a good result for them. And hopefully that's a group that is qualifying for the state finals and can be in contention for a good placement. We're going to move out to California here, and we've got the Burbank Blast results on tap. This competition did not end until just about 1 a.m. local time or 4 a.m. Eastern time. So some of y'all on the East Coast were like almost in wake-up mode when this one ended. I think it's going to be my goal one of these times to like wake up in Central Time before one of these West Coast competitions has ended. So we had 2 choirs in the top advanced mixed division. John Burroughs Powerhouse took musicianship and showmanship over Los Alamitos Sound Effects. And then in advanced mixed division 2, we had Jackson Prep Revion take home musicianship in the division win over Heart Sound Vibrations, who took showmanship, and then Diamond Bar Marquee in 3rd, and Brea Olinda Masquerade in 4th. California is known for having, in my opinion, too many divisions, so we'll just run through a list of other division winners. In intermediate mixed, John Burroughs Sound Waves. In advanced women's, John Burroughs Sound Sensations. In advanced women's 2, Los Al Exquisite. In intermediate women's, Los Al Accent. And then in the men's division, John Burroughs Men at Work. Adam, last year among California's big 3, John Burroughs, Los Al, Burbank, there were a lot of competitions where we had split caption wins. We had time penalties factoring in to the win. None of that this time around. We have John Burroughs taking 2 captions and the win. John Burroughs and Los Al are both headed east of the Mississippi this weekend. Does this, and we'll talk about John Burroughs later in this episode, what does this mean for both of these groups?
Yeah, so first of all, Burroughs, like you mentioned, was a group last year whose placements on showchoir.com may not have reflected, or just on the scoring sheet in general, were greatly impacted by that time penalty. But like you said, it was a clean sweep across. One thing I do want to talk about here is, like you said, these groups are headed out this next weekend, and I think they'll both do spectacularly. We'll talk a little bit about Wheaton coming up here with Los Alamitos. But I don't know if I want to move on too quick here, but the mixed division in Tier 2, we saw Jackson Prep bring a win, and that's, a group that traveled all the way up from Mississippi for this competition. And, I had expected Hart to take the win, but I was wrong. And I am gladly wrong, too, because you love to see a group, come from out of state and take it home with them. So thoughts
Yeah, that was
about
definitely
that?
something that I was going to get around to. Jackson Prep, I don't think I'm really raining on anybody's parade when I say that it hasn't been the season that Prep has wanted it to be in the South. Finals appearances have been kind of few and far between for them a little bit. You even look at just their crosstown competition with Jackson Academy. They're a few steps behind JA this year. They are not in the super mixed category. They're just in the regular mixed category. And so for Prep to come out here, and I think it was going to be unrealistic to expect them to match up with Burroughs and Los Al. I mean, it's unrealistic for 99.5% of this nation's show choir groups to do that. So for them to come in the next available division, and it's not like it was a clean sweep, but they did take the musicianship award, which translates to best vocals for those of you who don't speak California show choir. And so Heart is a group that was coming off of a very big advanced mix 2 win, I believe, at Chaparral the week before, either Chaparral or Esperanza. Maybe it was at Esperanza. But I had one of those two competitions. And so for them to beat Heart, granted, it is a late season Prep show versus still kind of an early season Heart show. But the fact of the matter is what happened on the stage that day happened on the stage that day. One interesting thing, not specifically related to placements, Los Al seems to be doing a show in a very similar vein to Burbank's 2012 Prodigal show. Showchoir.com shared some first look photos of Los Al on their Instagram page on Sunday, I believe. I very highly recommend looking at those photos. And for those people who've seen the Burbank show, the glowing chest, right? It's a pretty unmistakable resemblance. Adam, did you see the photos? Are you fresh on Burbank's 2012 show? What do you think?
Oh yeah, so yes to both of those. I actually had the privilege of watching a video of Los Al show just today, and one thing I will remark upon is there were definitely some similar undertones, but they took a unique approach with it, and so I think it's a little more geared towards themes about artificial intelligence and humanity, which I think is very interesting to see. I think we had someone predict on our staff earlier this year that that was a theme we would see emerged this year. I can't recall who it was off the top of my head, but I'm certain it was on there somewhere. But yeah, there's definitely that resemblance. I was looking at the pictures on showchoir.com's Instagram and thinking to myself, wow, this looks very, very similar to costumes and lighting design that I've seen before, but that's California show choir for you. There's always those super elaborate light and set designs, and I always find it very visually pleasing.
Yeah, absolutely. A couple of final notes in this competition. Number one, this was the second competition for John Burroughs versus the first for Los Al. And so, especially in competitions that don't have finals, if you are not exactly on your A game the very first time out for the season, you can get swallowed up. And is that what happened to Los Al? I don't know. I wasn't there. I don't think nobody truly knows the potential of that show right now. But I think that's definitely something to watch out for. Is that Burroughs did have a 1 week head start on Los Al, and so especially as both groups head into nationally competitive events this week, that's something to keep in mind. Also, intermediate mixed, they did announce placements 6 groups down, which was pretty nice. I think it was a 9 choir division, and they announced placements 6 choirs down. So behind John Burroughs and Los Al in intermediate, you had some nice California groups. You had Cypress coming home kind of best of the independents in 3rd place, followed by Oceanside, who's been on the rise these past couple of years, Granada Hills, and Eisenhower. So I just wanted to give a shout out to a couple of those more undercard California programs. We're going to move on to America's Heartland now. We're going to move to Iowa with the Lewis Central Clash of the Titans. This one, the final results here, Lincoln East Express taking home Best Choreography and Best Vocals and 1st place. Omaha Westside ATSC 2nd place. Millard West Wig 3rd place. Papio South Titanium 4th place and Best Band. Papio South Titan Radiance 5th place. And Millard South on Stage in 6th place. Adam, were you in last week's episode or not? You were.
I was.
So
Yes.
you remember that Ethan and I were trading jabs with sunglasses,
Mhm.
and I don't have my sunglasses sitting next to me here right now, but I did put on the sunglasses for Lincoln East win, and by golly, win Lincoln East
Right.
did. So I just want to take a small victory lap here. So a huge congratulations to all of the Lincoln East kids. This is Grand Championship number 4 on the year for them. So that is a huge season for them. They've beat a ton of people in the Nebraska scene, and definitely expressed with their new head director, Elizabeth Wissink, assistant director, Micah Friesen, who's straight out of UNL. Future is very bright for Express. Going down the list, West Side, I don't know if it's been the season that West Side has wanted it to be. They come home with a pretty solid second. And then Millard West and Papio South, when there are just this many great groups at a competition, someone's got to be third and fourth. And then Papio South, Titan Radiance in fifth, and Millard South in sixth. What other notes kind of stand out for you?
Well, I did see someone comment about Glenwood. Stick around 5 more minutes. We're going to be right on it. But one thing I did want to add is there's been a lot of talk about West Side and Millard West as programs in Nebraska, as groups like Lincoln. We have groups like Lincoln East. We have groups like Gretna. We have Res. I mean, these are groups whose names may not have been quite as solidified as those of West Side and Millard West, right? But I don't think that speaks to West Side being a worse program. From what I've seen of their show this year, it's still been phenomenal, and it most certainly was a rougher start for them as well. And not to belittle the placement here, but I still think it's a fantastic win over groups that are really, really great, right? And I think the best representation of that is our fourth place group here, and that's Papio South, and that's a group that did numbers last year. And I don't think that they had a drop off per se. I just think that the Nebraska show choir scene has been so much more competitive this year. So I'm just thrilled to see Express doing so well this season. It wasn't something that I predicted from the upstart, and I'm glad that I'm wrong, because it means next year is going to be so much fiercer. So Nebraska show choir is one I'll keep an eye on. And I'd also like to point out that every single group here in finals was from Nebraska, despite it being an Iowa competition.
Yeah,
So
you touch on a great point there, and I could spend a long time talking about how the the placements. I think Nebraska is the epitome of it this year. The South was kind of there last year, in which becoming a show choir Titan, it's not a mercantilist system. It's not a one-for-one swap. Whereas, like, if Lincoln East were to become a Titan, then we subtract Papio South from this conversation. I think it's a great thing that we're getting to the point where we have more and more programs that we can say, okay, we know year in and year out that they're going to put a phenomenal show on the stage. And so I could talk for a long time about that, but I think it's something to be celebrated and not something to be marginalized. Quick shout out to Titan Radiance. This is 2 years in a row that they've been fifth at Clash of the Titans, and also all six finalist groups from Nebraska. There were groups from South Dakota here, there were groups from Texas here, and Nebraska clean sweeping in finals. Glenwood, the event, this one in Illinois. This one does not feature all six finalist groups from the same state, especially not a different state from where the competition was hosted. Mount Zion Swing Stations get into the win column this year, taking home the win, best vocals and best choreo. El Paso Gridley Modulations, best band in second place. Waubonsie Valley Soundcheck in third place. Mantino Magic fourth. Marquette Center Stage in fifth. Mount Zion La Femme in sixth place. This is where we miss Ethan a little bit, because Ethan was at this competition, but alas, we are left to debate it ourselves. Adam, before I say anything about what the results mean, what do you think the results mean?
Well, I tell you what, Battle for the Top must have been tight, because from both shows I've seen really, really fantastic dancing, right? And the Mount Zion visuals this year being especially unique. There's some cool prop usage. And additionally, I mean, the rest of the finals groups here are also fantastic groups, right? We've seen a lot of Mantino. We've seen a lot of Waubonsie Valley this year. But if Ethan were here, he would definitely commend Swings on their momentous win here. This is awesome for them. This is their first win of the season, which is bizarre to me,
Well,
because
it's only
it's
their
such a
third
fantastic
competition.
group. But
That's the even more
yeah, it just
mind-boggling part, is that Illinois
yeah,
usually is a scene that
I
fires up
just
pretty
like
early,
yeah.
and yet this is only Swing's
Like,
third.
they host their competition like
Yep.
mid-January, don't they?
Yeah, the other thing that I look at here is that I look at the top three groups, and what do the top three groups all have in common? They are all at the same place this upcoming weekend. And so as we begin the process of of filtering who we think is going to make the evening round at the Coral Classic, which is not even a conversation for tonight. That's a conversation for Wednesday night. Uh, that is an hour-long conversation in and of itself. Come back Wednesday night for the Wheaton Warrenville South Preview podcast. As we begin the process of trying to figure out who's going to come out on top, this is definitely a piece of the puzzle. We see Mount Zion with both vocal and choreography wins over El Paso Gridley. So I think that is probably solidified there. And then Waubonsie Valley in third. So I would say that is a pretty safe order. Obviously, we see shows turn corners at certain points. Mantino is a group that I think is just kind of there in fourth place. Personally, I had them above Waubonsie Valley. But like you said, Adam, this has been a resurgent season for Mantino. And then Mount Zion LaFemme taking home a pretty good single gender division win over El Paso Gridley High Fidelity and Waubonsie Valley Resonance as well. All right, we're going to talk about the Totino-Grace Show Choir Spectacular, and this is where we are hopefully going to fire into the first of our guest segments. So let me see if I can get a guest on here real quick. I was actually at this competition. Here we go. Demir, welcome to the podcast.
Hi,
Hi, guys.
So Demir and I were actually both at this competition. We had the pleasure of meeting each other during finals. It was fantastic. And so the results of the Totino-Grace Show Choir Spectacular: in first place with Best Choreography, Gretna Revolution. In second place with Best Vocals and Best Band, Hastings Riverside Company. Third place, Onalaska Hilltoppers. Fourth place, North St. Paul Northern Lights. Fifth place, Bemidji Vocal Motive. And in sixth place, La Crosse Central Grand Central Station. I had my views from the audience, but I'll toss it to the man who was on stage. Demir, how was your experience at TG?
This comp really felt like a bloodbath. Like all of these teams coming in at such a high level and just like kind of fighting. I felt like everyone was kind of fighting in pairs, the way I view it. Like Gretna and Hastings were fighting for that first and second spot. Onalaska and North St. Paul were fighting for that third and fourth spot. And then Bemidji and La Crosse fighting for that fifth and sixth spot. And Holman trying to sneak their way in, but barely missing finals.
Absolutely. And I think the score sheet does kind of prove that too. At least from prelims, you had Gretna and Hastings pretty tight. Hastings actually on top by 10.5. You had Onalaska and North St. Paul separated by half a point. And then you had Bemidji and La Crosse Central and Holman also within generally 15 points in that 5-6 category, 5-6-7 category. Let's start off from the top here. Adam, I'll toss this to you. You're the one who's putting together these 60-second recaps. You see the best shows in the country week in and week out. Gretna finishes the season at 5-4-5 on the year. What does this mean? They are the first group to 5 wins this year. From an outsider's perspective, how do you take this?
Well, Gretna is not a Gretna is well, sorry. Gretna is not a Minnesota show choir. And so while there was a lot of Minnesota and Wisconsin action happening up here, this is a group from Nebraska, right? And so me personally, I have Gretna in my national top 10 this year. I feel that this is a group that has been just really so fantastic, and they have made a name for themselves. But I think it's definitely worth pointing out that you had Hastings take this vocal caption, and correct me if I'm wrong, Gretna still won by a decent margin. So
I did not see the finals sheets, so I cannot say one way or the other for sure.
Oh, yes. Okay, sorry. But at least from an outside perspective, this was definitely a tight fight for finals, right? You have groups like Holman, you mentioned, that kind of missed out, that I had watched earlier this season and been very impressed by. So to see Gretna, Hastings, Onalaska, and the rest of these groups all in one place, and I see a comment about it too. It was definitely a weekend to remember. So yeah.
Demir, I'll toss it to you next. I guess of the finalists, which shows did you see either in prelims or finals, and who impressed you the most out of these 6 groups?
I actually got to see all of the 6 finalists, whether it was both daytime and prelims. I got to see the first 2 and the last 2 finalists. I didn't get to see the group that went right before us, but I got to see all of them in prelims. Gretna definitely blew words. Gretna definitely blew me away. It was such an entertaining show to watch, but Hastings also, I could tell that they wanted it and they were working. Um, Holman really impressed me. Their choreo is so clean. Like it just like they were well put together, and it was like it's a very well rounded show, I'd say.
Absolutely. I think I'll start with Holman. Holman is a group that I actually had in finals. I saw this show at their home competition, and home exhibitions are kind of whatever. But that was also the first weekend of January, and the amount that show grew over the course of the year I thought was phenomenal. I actually had them in finals over Lacrosse Central, but Lacrosse Central was actually the fifth place choir in prelims, and Bemidji was sixth. Bemidji flips the script on them. In finals, this is actually kind of the same story as Onalaska the second weekend of January, where Bemidji took the overall win at Onalaska in a split caption decision over Lacrosse Central. I think Lacrosse Central, it is the novelty set to end all novelty sets. It's a fair show, which is a
Oh
very
yeah.
common novelty show theme. The closer is the only song with no props in it. They have the most elaborate riser setup I've ever seen a group in Wisconsin do. So they were doing the most this year. Bemidji, very interesting to see the first show of the Gunnar Oss era. Obviously, when you replace a director like Chris Fettig, there is going to be a different look to the show. They brought in Kevin Chase as a new choreographer as well. So I was very excited to see that kind of start of an era show in Bemidji. North St. Paul was a show that I hadn't seen all year. I thought it was kind of a typical North St. Paul product. It was a show that had a lot going on, but a lot of it was done well. Onalaska was another show that I saw at the beginning of the season, and I thought it grew a ton. Hastings was a show that I hadn't seen Riverside live in 6 years, which is way too long to go without seeing Hastings live when you're from this part of the country. And it was phenomenal. You know, their set design, while it was not like an emotionally taxing show design, it was still a phenomenal show design. Like Demir said, you could visibly tell, you could sense your spidey sense was tingling with the effort that the Riverside kids were putting in, both in prelims and in finals. And then Gretna, I mean, that show just wrecked me. Sobbing by the end of it both times, in prelims and in finals. I mean, it was so bad that during finals I was sitting next to some Gretna parents and they basically forced Kleenex into my hands. And you know, I talked to their directors, you know, phenomenal people, Caitlin Wallace and Dakota Matthew. Shout out Nathan Shelby, who I watched some shows with in the morning from Gretna. So glad I got to see this show live. The tough part, and Demir, you were there too, so I don't know if you have a different thought on this. The tough part for me is that Hastings was the fifth finalist to perform, and then Gretna was the sixth finalist to perform. After each of Hastings and Gretna, I both said nobody is beating that. After Gretna performed, I said that's it, wrap it up, nobody's beating it. And then Hastings performed, and I'm like, nope, other way around, that we're done. And so I guess I am kind of glad that it's split captions because I couldn't figure out who's going to win. Demir, I don't know. What did you think?
Yeah, I like right after North St. Paul performed, I went to go watch because Gretna. I think yeah, Hastings went last and Gretna went fifth. I watched Gretna and I was like, whoa, like Hastings is gonna have to work really hard to top that. And then Hastings worked really hard to like try their best to top that. And like finals awards, I was like, this could go either way. And I feel like I was content with like no matter which teams went, which team took the grand champion, I would be fine with it because like they both worked so hard and you could tell that both teams wanted it and they were working hard as a team.
And that is something that I made a mindset choice before finals. So I watched prelims trying to get a handle on where groups are going to be. By the time finals rolled around, I said, you know what, I'm going to put my notebook away. I'm going to put my phone down. I'm not going to take any notes. I'm just going to sit back and watch six phenomenal late season shows, I guess eight, because there were exhibitions on both ends of finals. And it was just a fantastic evening of show choir. Totino was, however, sadly, the end to the Minnesota show choir season. So as our resident Minnesotan, we thought that we would fire some questions at Demir. I guess number one is going to be, what are a couple of your favorite Minnesota shows this year?
I think my top two favorite Minnesota shows are Hastings, Riverside, and Waconia Power Company. Both shows, while they're completely opposite, like could just draw the attention from anywhere. Like just such eye-opening shows, and like both had such good meaning, and it was they were yeah.
And then second question is just, how do you think Minnesota show choir is doing on the whole? Like what are some of the vibes that you picked up across the circuit this year?
Minnesota Show Choir, I feel like did not come to play this year. I feel like they put their foot in. I think most Minnesota show choirs stepped out of the state or to a new comp at least once, um, and all placed pretty well at those comps and beating teams. I think that those teams Minnesota has never beaten before, and I think Minnesota is starting to become one of those show choir states that people should be on the lookout for.
Awesome. Adam, what kind of questions do you got for him?
Well, I'm interested to know. So it's definitely very strange to see some of these seasons ending as the other ones are beginning. If it was your choice, what would the ideal show choir season look like? When would it start and when would
I
it
like
end?
seasons starting at the end of January and ending in March. I just feel like it gives you so much time to grow your show, and there are a lot more competitions available, especially in those February weekends. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, because that late February is like we were looking over some of the graphics and stuff, right? And you two are more familiar than anyone about this, but just how many competitions there were at that point in the year. So,
Yeah, I think Minnesota has a very well-established February run. You have Bloomington Kennedy to kick off the month. Then you go from there to North St. Paul. The next weekend is Baconia. The next weekend is Hastings. The next weekend is Totino. Like they have their ducks in a row, and they've had their ducks in a row for a while. So I think that is prime Minnesota competition season. Demir, I think I'm going to round out the questions here with one more heavier one, and you can decline to answer this one if you so choose. You have your Minnesota powerhouses that are still on top. You look at Waconia and Hastings as the best two examples of that. They've been at the top for a long time, and they still are there. And then you see some groups. Bloomington Kennedy has had a resurgence pretty recently. Especially after the pandemic, these past 2 years, they've been doing spectacular. Bloomington Jefferson is a group that surprised a lot of people this year. And then on the flip side of that, you have groups like Totino-Grace and St. Francis who have lost longtime directors very recently. So there's been a little bit of change in the Minnesota show choir scene. I guess going forward, I would say maybe next 2 to 3 to maybe 4 years, where do you see Minnesota show choir going?
I could see. I think Hastings and Waconia and even Bloomington Kennedy. I feel like they're pretty set, and they're gonna grow from here. They're gonna continue to thrive. Um, Bemidji, I think, really worked their way up to where they had been. Same with Totino-Grace. I think North St. Paul is doing pretty good, flat out, with the new director switch over the last couple of years. Um, I think they have room to grow. A group that I think is gonna grow, I hope so, is South St. Paul. They surprised a lot of people making finals at Altoona this year, um, beating out Bridge Street. Yeah, yeah.
Yep, that is correct. All right. There we go. Yeah, Minnesota's always been near and dear to my heart because I've been in so close proximity to it. Been and competed in Minnesota and had lots of fun doing it. And we do have a few smaller programs in Minnesota as well, groups like Waseca, Underwood, New Prague, that kind of deal. So hopefully we get to see some more groups join in Minnesota. I think it's been a few years. I think Underwood is maybe the last one that joined that is still going. So Demir, you've got one more year of high school show choir
Yep.
left. We wish you the best, and thank you so much for coming on tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So that is Demir. He is our Minnesota uh, staff member here at Homeroom Show Choir. And so we are going to try and bring on our next guest now. Let me see if I can figure out how to run a multiple guest setup here. Let's see. There we go. All right. Tony, welcome back to the podcast.
Hello. Glad to be on.
All right. You are rocking a Southern Miss sweatshirt, which I believe is not where you go to college,
That is not.
but it is very, very near and dear to my heart because a certain Kiln, Mississippi native by the name of Brett Favre went there. And Brett Favre is a very controversial topic in the state of Mississippi. He's not a controversial topic in the state of Wisconsin, where I am from. So I respect your Southern Miss sweatshirt, good sir.
Good to hear.
All right, so before we launch into the Southern preview for the week, because we do have one pretty massive competition coming up in the Southern Circuit, We do want to ask you a couple questions quick. First one, this should be a pretty easy question for you. Who's your least favorite Homewood alum, and who's your least favorite Brandon alum?
Least favorite Homewood alum. It's close between like three people. I got to go with Dobbs though. No, I take that back. Dobbs is Turtle. There's a whole story behind this, but Dobbs is Turtle. I'm gonna catch he double hockey sticks for this later. But and Brandon, it's Jason. Yeah, we'll go with Jason.
Okay. So Jason beats Aiden for the title of least favorite Brandon alum. For those of you who are not from the South for legal reasons, this is all a joke. Just want to cover our bases here. But going into the real questions now, what's a Southern group or two or three that have surprised you in a good way this year?
Well, off the bat, Grenada. Wow, out of nowhere.
Grenada had
But
2 wins last year. Is this really out of
well,
nowhere?
Well, those two wins were over basically their main competition at those events for Madison Central. And Madison Central had a solid show last year, but what they're it wasn't that they were not good last year, it's just what they are this year is a whole nother level. Like this year they've basically equated to what Brandon's done at Jassy. They beat Brandon in prelims, lost them in finals, and they reversed that at Pedal where they lost to Brandon in prelims and then beat them in finals. And Brandon hasn't gotten any worse than what we saw them from last year. So like Grenada's kind of taken that like next step up. It may have to do with them and Brandon being rivals. I have no idea. But Grenada definitely off the bat would be the first group I say. Second, honestly, Homewood. I know they're like pretty much that second group in the South, but with the new director change, everyone was kind of like looking at them like, is this still going to be the Homewood? Are they still going to have that same Scott Thorne style? And while they completely changed their style, they're still just as good, if not better than ever.
Awesome. Second question. We saw a number of Southern groups go up to the Midwest this year. We've seen Brandon do so. We've seen Homewood do so. We are going to see Pedal do so, I believe, at Marysville here in a couple of weeks. We occasionally see Midwest groups come down south, but it is more common, I think, to see Southern groups go up to the Midwest. And I'm not talking like a Tennessee group going up to Indiana. I'm talking like real like Alabama, Mississippi groups going up to Indiana, Ohio, whatever. Do you think that more Midwest groups should go to the South, or do you like the dynamic has where the South plays spoiler to some Midwest competitions?
I mean, both have their pros and cons. Obviously, Southern Hospitality, we love having groups down here, not only just to host them, but just to kind of like, see how different regions do it and kind of expose the younger groups like, hey, we're not the only show choir style. There are these Midwest groups who are more traditional, more clean, especially with their footwork. There's these California groups with like really great show themes that we can draw inspiration from, but also at the same time, we also do like kind of bringing the fight to other places, kind of being the underdog in some situations, being like, we're here. And I mean, we may be from one of the smaller regions in the nation, but it does have nothing to do with our circuit.
Adam, what's a question you got for him?
Yeah, okay. So, he talked about a show that, a show that's really stood out to you, right? And this is a more subjective question here. What is your favorite show design this year? Or your maybe I'll rephrase it. What is the most entertaining show you've seen? Not objectively the best, but just the most entertaining show you've
It's
sat
beating a
and
dead
watched.
horse, but Grenada. This year they have a ugly duckling theme, and from the opener, there's a really cool moment where they're singing to like the ugly duckling, and they kind of get her like let her guard down. They call her pretty, and then everyone yells ugly, and the whole crowd loses their mind. The boys' number is "Fly" by Silk Sonic, so you already know that's entertaining as possible. With a great performer in K. Smith, shout out. But from the beginning to end of that show, you're in your seat jumping, singing with them, cheering them on. They just uploaded a video from Madison Central this last week, and I highly recommend going to watch it.
I know I've already viewed that video plenty of times. I've been waiting for
We
a
all
couple weeks now,
have
man.
down here.
Awesome. We're going to get into the Tift County preview in just a second. But final question as we kind of wrap up the interview segment. Mississippi debuted a new extra large division this year. And I think this weekend was definitely a weekend that brought that new division kind of more into the spotlight because both at Oak Grove and at Madison Central, you had a relatively small number of competing groups spread out over a relatively large number of divisions. So I guess number one, What do you think? And have you heard positive feedback about the new extra large division of Mississippi? And number two, not even getting into the politics of groups have more kids than the division that they're in. But do you think that the South should keep doing their divisions by group size?
Honestly, as big of a change as it was coming into the season, as much talk as we heard about it, I haven't really heard any pros or cons in terms of the effects or results coming from it. I also think maybe it's a bit too early to really gauge that because we haven't had too many competitions where I could say that's played a major factor. From the little sample size I think we have seen, I know groups like Northwest and Jackson Prep going from large to or from staying in large while others went to super large. They haven't placed higher throughout the season. I'm not saying that has anything to do with that. It's just it is a little kind of trend we've seen, so that may be something to keep an eye on. But again, it's way too I think early to really gauge if that's affecting anything.
And then do you agree with the South doing their divisions by group size? Because we see other circuits do it by skill level or school enrollment. We see the South, and I think a couple other places, maybe some Ohio competitions, and most of New England do it by group size. Do you think that's the right way to go, or if it was your choice, would you switch it to something else?
I understand group size and I can agree with it. I also kind of wish like school size itself played into a factor because I know like me, I came from a 2A school with like 60 kids graduating, and there was a time or two that we would compete against schools with like 300, 400 kids. They still had 20 or 30 kids on stage, but like you understand they're drawing from a way larger pool. I think Oxford is a good example. Great show choir. I think they have 350-ish kids per grade. So,
So that's a pretty solid, maybe like 1,300 kid high school then.
exactly.
Yeah. Very, very interesting that you bring that up because there are a lot of people who like swear off divisions by school size. So I think it's very interesting to get a number of perspectives. Where Adam's from in Indianapolis, the small and large school debate has kind of flared up again this year in regards to a couple of choirs, and we can talk about that in the off season. That's not why we're here. We're going to get into the Tift County Peach State Invitational preview. So in the large mixed division, we got Brandon Brio, we got Oak Mountain Singers, we got Oak Grove Center Stage, we got Albertville Center Stage, and we got Appling County Applause. In the small mixed division, Fitzgerald Encore Unlimited, Rome Grand Finale, Tarpon Springs Syndicated Sound, North Paulding Enchorus, and Tallahassee Voltage. And then in the single gender division, we got Brandon Bellas, Oak Mountain The Muses, both Tallahassee single gender groups, Albertville and DeKalb. Adam and I probably know the most about this large mixed battle, so we'll start there. Adam, from an outsider's perspective, we got Brandon and Oak Mountain. Who do you got on top?
Oh, see, this is where you shouldn't ask me because I haven't seen Oak Mountain show this year, and I have heard nothing but terrific things. That being said, I want to hold my cards close to me here and call Brandon because I have not seen their show, and based solely off of their reputation from last year, and you can feel free to correct me because I will be wrong about a lot of things here. I'm gonna give it to Brandon, and then I'll throw in both captions, Oak Mountain, and then I think we're gonna see a Univoice group
No
take third here, and
finals.
I'm
No
gonna
finals.
actually sit. Oh, there's no finals. Okay, then I will go ahead and give it to Albertville, and that wait no Oak Grove, and then Albertville, and then Appling County.
All right, yeah. This one's very interesting. If you've been following our Southern Poll rankings, which Tony does a great job with every week, Brandon and Oak Mountain have basically been tied at the hip for most of this past month. I believe Oak Mountain did get a leg up on Brandon within these past couple weeks, but they've been super, super close. Oak Mountain is a group that's been on the rise. I believe this is the first year in a long time that they've won multiple competitions in the year. Petal pretty much swept them in prelims at Jasper, at Opelika, somewhere in Alabama. And then Oak Mountain stormed back and beat them in finals, and that was a whole deal. So you know that Oak Mountain's better than Petal. I'll take Oak Mountain with vocals over Brandon with choreo. This 3 and 4 is super interesting. Oak Grove has finaled multiple times this year for the first time in who knows how long. Albertville's been a pretty solid middle mixed choir in year number 2 under Chris Wilson. So I guess similar to Adam, I'll take Albertville at the 3, Oak Grove at the 4, and round it out with Appling at the 5. Tony, tell us how we're just so off base here.
Honestly, there is no right answer because the groups that these two have competed against, with Oak Mountain, like you said, competing against Petal, Auburn, those other groups, whereas Brandon's yet to compete against Petal in the same state, but they've competed against Clinton, Grenada, JA, those other groups. So we have like no idea how to really gauge these two in terms of like similar competitors. I'm like these are right there by each other. I'm gonna say I'm gonna let the Mississippi bias sink in here, but in doing so, I'm going to pick Oak Mountain because for some reason Brandon does better when they're not expected to win. So would keep that in mind when I say Oak Mountain first. I very well could see Oak Mountain winning. I do think they take vocals with Brandon taking choreo and show design. With that being said, though, it's going to be that close. I would round it out. I'll swap it. I'll put Oak Grove at third. I'll put Albertville fourth, and I'll put Appling County fifth.
Awesome. Moving down to small mixed, we've got Fitzgerald, Rome, Tarpon Springs, North Paulding, and Tallahassee. For those of us who don't live in the South, we've probably seen 0 of these shows throughout our life from all of these combined 5 groups. What's the move in small mixed?
I'll be honest with you. About three of these groups I have actually never heard of before. Not no disrespect, but I don't. They just don't compete in the kind of. They're in the southern area, but I don't know if they're in the true southern circuit. However, I do know that Rome Grand Finale usually is a solid middle competing group, and I would have them first here. Maybe Tallahassee second. I'm not confident in the rest of it though.
Yeah, we do have a very interesting mix of states here. We've got Fitzgerald, Rome, and North Paulding from Georgia, Tarpon Springs from Florida, and Tallahassee from Alabama. Single gender, Muses, Bellas, Albertville Sensations has looked pretty sporty recently. What's the move in single gender?
I love the Brandon kids. Muses are taking it. Brandon probably comes in second. I'm looking at it here. Albertville probably third. Gold now Tallahassee may put up a fight at third. I know Gold Edition. I believe that's their guys group. They've actually had a very good season this year, which is cool to see the base division grow in the South. So I think Tallahassee, both their boys or girl groups could challenge Albertville, but I'm going to have Albertville going third with Tallahassee taking fourth and fifth.
There we go. Well, this is the end of Southern competition season. We do got some Southern groups going to show choir nationals and things like that. Our next segment is Heart of America Nashville. So real quick, we got Tupelo going up against Franklin Central and Carroll in the women's division. Do we take a Tupelo win in the women's division?
So they're competing against who again? Remind me.
Franklin Central from Indiana, and then Carroll from Fort Wayne, Indiana.
You know what? It's another one of those where it's going to be really close. I think though, with High Voltage's year so far, and I've seen Tupelo show live, so I know what they can bring. They can win at 100%, and I think after how they got second last year, they're going to be coming with a vengeance. I'm going to give them first year.
All right.
I'd agree with that as for single gender, yeah, as an Indiana person.
Awesome. Well, Tony, thank you so much for coming on the pod. We really appreciate it.
Of course, anytime.
All right. So that was Tony Holman. He is our Southern guy. He does a phenomenal job writing the Southern rankings, Southern reviews, and Southern previews for each week. And so our next segment is Heart of America Nashville. So Adam, we will speed through this one pretty quickly here. We've got Franklin Central, Wheaton North, and Carroll in the varsity mixed. And then in the open mixed, we've got Cathedral and Greenfield Central. And then in women's, Franklin Central, Carroll, Cathedral, and Tupelo. You're the Indiana guy, lots of Indiana flavor here. 6 overall finalists. So between the varsity, the open mixed, and the women's. Real quick, what should we expect from HOA Nashville?
Well, I don't think there's too much question about who's coming out on top here. I think Franklin Central has emerged as a national titan in recent years, and well, not in recent years. They've always been great, but this year I think especially they've been really, really fantastic. I think where I have questions, and I didn't have questions a couple weeks ago, but now I have questions, is for that first runner-up spot. And I had initially favored Wheaton North going into this with a pretty heavy hand. But Carroll is a really fantastic group that really gets rolling throughout the season. We saw them last year at HOA New York, bringing an entirely different show than the one that they had just a couple months before, right? And of course, with these small groups and these women's groups, these are some really, really fantastic finalists as well. So while it isn't the bloodbath it was next year, this will still be a great show.
All right. There we go. I will just quick run them down here. I think I will still take Wheaton North at the 2 behind Franklin Central. I'll take Carroll at the 3, and then Tupelo's girls at the 4, Franklin Central's girls at the 5, and I'll take Cathedral's mixed to stage an upstart bid for that last finalist spot.
And I wish I could be difficult here, but I'll give it the exact same treatment here. So
there we go.
I'll put my pen down.
Going over to Ohio, we got the Fairfield Crystal Classic. This one is super interesting. In large mixed, we've got Marysville, Olentangy, Loveland, and Robert C. Byrd. In middle mixed, Twinsburg, Musselman, Clover Hill, and Kenton. So a very interesting 3-state middle mixed division there. Small mixed, Sheridan, Whitehall, Yearling, South Dearborn, Edgewood, the Ohio one, and Ross. And then we've got some single gender groups in there as well. The final setup here, we've got 6 finalists between the large mixed, medium mixed, and large women's divisions, and then another 6 finalists between small mixed and small women's. So we've got 12 finalists going on, and there are going to be a lot more groups making finals than missing finals. So let's start with the first set of finals, which is large mixed, middle mixed, and large women's. We've got 6 finalists. I believe we've got 10 groups going for those spots. Marysville, Olentangy, Loveland, who comes out on top?
Well, you know what? Here's what I'll give it. For the fact that they may have had a rockier start vocally this season, I think Marysville takes both captions home. And I'll favor them for that top slot. I'll put Loveland right behind him. I'll have Olentangy slide in there at the 3 with Robert Seabird rounding out the mixed division there. And I don't think we'll have an upset from the large Univoice division, but I will go ahead and say that they'll sit right below there. Won't be difficult for them to make finals if there's only 6. So I will see all those groups get to perform twice, which is fantastic. And I'm going to give the edge to Loveland here with the Univoice division.
This is super interesting. I agree with you on the top 3 placements. I would go Marysville, Loveland, Olentangy. And then I'll take Loveland. Do I want to take Loveland's girls at the 4 over Robert Seabird? This is they are a great group.
So it's
you know what? I'll take Loveland's girls at the 4. I'll take Robert Seabird at the 5, and then for that final mixed, that last top division final spot, I'll take Clover Hill winning the middle mixed division. Clover Hill just came out with a big win at Manchester this past weekend in Virginia, and so I will take Clover Hill as the last finalist in that arena. Then we've got 6 finalists in between small mixed and small women. So small mixed, we've got Sheridan, Whitehall, Yearling, South Dearborn, Edgewood, and Ross. And then in small women's, we've got Clover Hill, Iridescence, and Mount Notre Dame. So I believe we have 7 groups for 6 final spots. Where do you see things shaking out?
So I'll be completely honest here. I am going to snuff Mount Notre Dame's Univoice group here. I've just never seen them personally or heard of them. So, if anyone has some info on that, has a video of this group, I'd love to see it. I hate counting out groups that I don't know enough about. But in the same sense, I'm not going to put my money on them. I'm going to go ahead and give that division to Edgewood, Ohio specifically. If it's small mix there, that doesn't include middle mix, right?
Just small mix.
Middle mix is grouped into large. Yeah. I'll go ahead and I'll call it Edgewood. They've had a great season as a program that's pretty consistently all right. They did a nice job last year. I got to see them. And I will give the 2 to a group that has struggled because of the division sizes in Indiana. And I will go ahead and give that second spot to South Dearborn. This is a group of kids that's been competing since the very start of January. Great singers and dancers. There's only 26 of them, but they put on a heck of an entertaining show. I'll give the 3rd spot to Clover Hill's girls right there, and then to Sheridan, Ross, and Whitehall Yearling.
All right, there we go. I'll go in a little different dimension here. I'll take South Dearborn at the win, and frankly, I don't know a lot about a ton of these programs, so I think I'm basically just tossing darts here. I'll go South Dearborn at the 1. I'll take Ross at the 2, Edgewood at the 3, Clover Hills girls at the 4, Sheridan 5, and Whitehall Yearling 6. So Come back and clown me next week to show how little I know about small mixed Ohio show choir. Moving on to Virginia, and I believe this is the first time Virginia makes an appearance in Comps of the Week this year, for a
Yes,
very, very
it is.
well-deserved Comps of the Week lineup. We've got the Cosby Titan Tournament of Choirs, and this is a competition that is only in its second year of existence. But for a comp that's in its second year of existence, here's the lineup: John Burroughs, Chesterton, Troy
Oh my
Buchanan,
God.
Scranton, Nitro, Powhatan, Pocosin. Just this crazy collision of scenes, none of them even close to Virginia. Let's start at the top. In the large mixed division, we've got John Burroughs, Chesterton, and two Troy Buchanan groups. John Burroughs coming off of a sweep of Los Al. Chesterton has been doing well this year. Troy Buchanan has been doing well this year. I mean, I don't know if anybody is challenging John Burroughs, but behind them, perhaps where do you see things going?
That's that's where there's a real fight, right? And I'll come in swinging. This is a bit of a hot take, right? A little bit of my Indiana bias here, but Chesterton has had their show up and kicking for months now. And while I don't think there's anyone that's gonna challenge Burroughs here, I really, really think, at least as of what I've seen from last week and the week before, this is one of the most, if not the most formidable singing group in the country. And so I'm going to give Burroughs the one. I'll give them both captions here. And then right behind them is where I get a little messy. I'll give it to Chesterton. And that I think will be because of vocals, if I had to call it. And then I'll put Troy right behind him. That one I'm not as confident in. And then here's another pairing that's going to be really close, but I will give Scranton the 4. This season has been one that's been really, really excellent for them. I'll put Nitro right behind him. Nitro being a fantastic group, which, has proved itself in that regard, right? And then I'll go ahead and slide in for that last bond finals. And correct me if I'm wrong. That's just that mixed tier 2 division, right?
So the interesting thing about finals is that there were 5 finalists from the mixed division last year. Nobody really knows how many there are going to be this year, because I think this year
Oh,
there might be a slightly larger lineup. So nobody really knows. I don't think, but we can put 6 groups in, and if there are less than 6, there are less than 6.
well, if I give it to a 6, I'll give it to Powhatan, if I'm saying that correctly. And then the last thing I'll say here is it's cool to see Buchanan on the judging panel. He's pretty new in the choreo and dance world, and so it's cool to see him.
Awesome. Yeah, this is a phenomenal lineup for a sophomore competition. We didn't really talk about small mix at all, but small mix is a heck of a division. You've got Goochland Surround Sound, which is a freshman choir from Virginia this year in their first year competing. Bull City Lights from Voyager Academy in North Carolina. Hillsborough Legacy, which is New Jersey's only competitive show choir. And then you've got Hanover Sound Effects from Virginia. So that's just a wild division. You've got choirs from 8 states competing here. I guess for finals, I'll take John Burroughs with 2 captions at the top. I'll take Troy Buchanan actually at the 2. Again, super close with Chesterton at the 3. I will also take Scranton at the 4. I'll actually take Troy Buchanan Soundwave at the 5. And I will take Nitro at the 6. Powhatan is also coming off of a podium placement this past weekend, so I feel bad putting Powhatan outside of finals, but ultimately when you have a lineup this deep, somebody's got to be outside of finals. Also, shout out to the women's and men's divisions that are going on Friday. Chesterton Drifters, John Burroughs Sound Sensations in the large division. That'll be a good matchup. And then in the small division, you have Douglas S. Freeman, who's been a great choir this year, multiple overall wins for them against Nitro's guys and Matoaka and Powhatan's girls. So just a wild lineup there. And we've got so many other storylines. We didn't even talk about the Wheaton Warrenville South Choral Classic. Some of you may have noticed. That's okay because that is Wednesday night's deal. So Wednesday night, time still TBD, but Wednesday night is going to be a live show entirely dedicated to the Choral Classic. This is just as much of a national event as Show Choir Nationals this year, so we only felt right to put it in a whole separate episode. Adam, are you competing this weekend?
I am. I will be at Lawrence on the east side of Indianapolis.
All right, so good luck to Adam. If you're going to be at Lawrence Central's The Classic, you can find him. If you are going to be at Wheaton Warrenville South, you can try and find me. I think the entire The equivalent of the entire city of Wheaton is going to be there. But it's going to be a phenomenal time. Thank you, everybody.
And if anyone at Wheaton Warrenville South has a video camera, I would
They,
much
they had a
appreciate it.
live stream
Yeah.
last year, so we'll see if they do that again this year. Thank you, everyone, for sticking around for the whole hour. This has been Show Choir Nation, a podcast from the Homeroom Show Choir Network. As a reminder, if you came in late, this show will be available on Spotify and YouTube within the hour, so make sure to check out our Spotify and YouTube presences. I hope you have a week filled with show choir, and have a phenomenal week, everyone. See ya.